Now it's time for our paper review. Sally joins us. Let's take a look through the morning front pages. Let's start with The Independent and the United States, who has accused North Korea of begging for war after its latest nuclear test. Washington is now urging the UN Security Council to impose the toughest sanctions possible on Pyongyang.
In the meantime, the South China Morning Post, of course, is looking at this story and the warning to North Korea from China not to launch another ballistic missile, saying it should not continue to worsen the tensions on the Korean peninsula.
The Guardian looks at Bell Pottinger, one of the UK's leading public relations agencies, which has been expelled from the industry's trade associations after an investigation uncovered a secret campaign to stir up racial tensions in South Africa. It has been considered one of the worst breaches of ethics in its history.
The Business Independent is looking at the UK economy, saying Britain's builders' activity amongst them has slumped to its lowest level since August of last year as firms delay projects over uncertainty in the industry in the run-up to Brexit.
And finally, on the front of the Telegraph, we have the smiling couple, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, who have, of course, announced that they're expecting their third child. The Queen and both families are said to be delighted with the news.
The more the merrier.
Oh, absolutely.
Don't they say?
My goodness. Let's begin. Let's speak to Stuart Thomson, who's head of public affairs at PR agency Bircham Dyson Bell.
Good morning.
Good morning. We'll get on to the royal family, of course, shortly, but we've got to start, of course, with North Korea. We've got the US ambassador to the UN talking about them begging for war. They are antagonistic, aren't they, to put it mildly?
It's like both sides have got big sticks and they're sort of prodding the hornet's nest of each side, and just to see who stings first. It feels like we're heading towards something major and potentially catastrophic, with nobody really quite knowing how to pull back from the brink. Trump on one side and the Americans and the North Koreans on the other, neither are necessarily renowned for their sense of sort of pulling back from that edge, unless China steps in and I think others with some peace mission, or just diffuse the situation, because otherwise that seems to be where we're heading for. And you see in history sometimes you sort of move towards things and there's a sense of inevitability. If we're not careful, this seems to be where that's going.
South China Morning Post looks at China's sort of most recent reaction, talking about China telling the North to back off amid fears of a new test. And it talks about the fact that the missile test on Sunday was upstaging the BRICS summit. I've talked about the BRICS summit, of course. China very involved in that, wanting that to be a big event for them in particular, showing strength. What do you make of China's response?
I think they're sort of slightly stuck between their traditional positions, which is generally sort of more pro-North Korea, and as you say, Sally, in terms of actually being a world player economically. It's got elections coming up this year or later in this year as well. We all need the Chinese to step up and do the sort of diplomatic thing. Now, maybe in the past, the country feels that it could sort of concentrate on one thing at a time. If they really are that sort of global player now, economically, socio-politically, and in other ways, it has to be able to do both and do it well and quickly. So we all need the Chinese to step up and work with the Americans, which is a change in culture for both sides, frankly.
Are we not pressurising the Chinese too much, though, in that case? Because we're waiting for this draft resolution. Of course, we've had many different UN resolutions which just simply have not worked. But on the flip side, isn't it the whole international community that needs to come together? And we're just not seeing any kind of agreement on what to do.
You're right. It needs international agreement, but it needs the Chinese in the lead. North Korea will listen to China, or traditionally has listened to China in the way that it doesn't listen to Western countries and others. So unless China is very much sort of leading that international collaboration, you can't see it working. So yes, we're placing a huge amount of emphasis and responsibility on China to do that. But that seems to be what needs to happen if we've got any chance of stepping back from any of this.
Let's talk about Bell Pottinger now. Now, just to say very clearly, your company has no connection.
Absolutely nothing to do with them whatsoever.
Bell in the name
it just
of
happens
your
to have Bell in the name. No,
company
quite,
as well.
Clarifying that, yes.
Just For those viewers who maybe are just tuning in right now, not familiar with this story, just explain the background. What has Bell Pottinger done wrong and got into trouble for?
It's undertaken a sort of a PR plan, if you like, a reputation management plan for the Guptas in South Africa, and I've undertaken sort of huge amounts. You've heard from the PRCA earlier this morning. Huge amounts of behaviour which is completely unethical, unacceptable, and the PR industry has stood up and said, look, you just can't do this. So hence them being expelled from the PRCA. I mean, I work in the communication sector. This is everything the sector shouldn't be seen to be doing.
I mean, I put this question to Francis Ingram. You know, are you surprised that this company that's so old, well established, and so well known within PR should make such a huge mistake?
Yeah, I am, because there's some good people in working in all these sort of firms. But Bell Pottinger have always sort of had good people that have worked for them over the years. For them to undertake that behaviour, or to undertake work of that type, for it not to have been checked, either in South Africa or back amongst sort of corporate HQ, if you like, is strange, confusing. For what reasons we don't really know, but the size of the contract per month, I would imagine would have. Yeah, I would imagine.
A month. That's a nice contract.
Yeah, it might have swayed some people's views about what they thought was acceptable or not acceptable, or, as was sort of indicated in the resignation speech yesterday, it was sort of rogue element that didn't tell the chief exec what was going on. I mean, that's not an acceptable excuse. I mean, that is just an excuse which is not right for a global organisation, as Bell Pottinger probably I think, is the...
Having worked in PR many, many moons ago, the relationship, you are continuously talking to the client. Where does the balance? Who pushes for the particular, the movement of the behaviour, I guess?
Well, I mean, if a client comes to you and says, look, we want this to happen, you have to stand firm and say, look, I'm not the person, we are not the firm to do that sort of thing. We don't want to work with you. If you've already got the contract and that's sort of already ongoing, you have to push back. You have to say that that's not acceptable, and you can point out the reasons why. I mean, here we're fundamentally talking about a firm that deals with reputation management, and its own reputation is in the dustbin.
Do you think this is enough now in terms of the PR industry? How damaging is it for the industry, or has the actions of the PRCA been enough? I
think the actions of the PRCA are to be applauded, and I think the firm action will be welcomed across the sector. Is it the last thing? No. I mean, you will always have, as in, politics, journalism, whatever it happens to be, there will always be somebody that undertakes some behaviour that, is unacceptable. So, no, it won't be the last, but by taking very strong and clear action against them, at least the industry has stood up, and so it's only to be applauded.
Right, moving on. Brexit, UK construction slumps to lowest. Yeah. Was very worrying, to put it mildly.
Yeah. I mean, some top projects, there's a lag. The investment is already committed, so the building goes ahead. This seems to be a set of indicators which looks like, sort of that post-Brexit period. Now some decisions on sort of current spending, if you like, are being made. The spending isn't happening. Now, you need more than one set of figures to draw out any sort of clear conclusions, and say it's the summer and it's rogue figures, and there will be a series of excuses why this can't be taken as a whole picture. But in and of itself, it does seem to be that companies and organisations are looking at their investment and going, do you know what, we're not sure about the UK.
This time yesterday, we had the story of Michel Barnier, who's the chief negotiator for the European Union, saying he wants to educate the British people as to the consequences of Brexit. How do you feel, the communication is being handled with regards to this story? Because it doesn't seem to be going well at all, does it, on both sides?
And we've seen it during the summer, and part of the UK Parliament comes back today to start discussing some of the legislation, around Brexit. It's been a summer full of he says, she says, one side doesn't. We don't really know. It's just not very clear.
And that makes it all the worse, doesn't it, for companies and businesses who are trying to make decisions,
absolutely,
who are going to hold off on a construction project because they have no idea what's going to happen in the next couple of years.
Yeah, what is that trading relationship? What is the financial services deal that will be done? Whatever sector it happens to be. Do I now, as a deep-pocketed investor, do I now put my money in, London, Birmingham, Manchester, or whatever, or do I go to Paris, Copenhagen, and other cities as well?
Now, we did promise the more the merrier. Of course, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge expecting their third child. Now, I was in Poland. I met the royal couple, and there was we saw the toy, the present that was given, and the kind of speculation. Obviously, I mean, there's so much speculation, but come on, when it comes to PR, they're priceless, aren't they? They just cannot put a foot wrong.
They are the golden couple, aren't they? The children look fantastic. All the pictures are great. Nobody says anything out of turn. So, and as the father of three as well, 3 children, a joy at all times.
There's George getting off the plane now, and there's Charlotte close behind. Of course, George starts school this week, doesn't he?
Oh my goodness.
Yes, yeah. Beginning of September. It's the same sort of story for all parents, but they're under the spotlight to a much greater extent than most of us.
Immense pressure,
luckily.
but a lot of privilege as well. Well, Stuart Thomson, thank you so much for joining us. It's been lovely to chat to you.
Enjoy your day. We'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.